I really don't know what it is. I think maybe somebody far more intelligent than me could make the link, but it sure seems like a lot of kind of social justice minded people seem to have some very concerning opinions about, well, a particular group of folks. Uh, I can't proclaim to know the answer. Maybe you can let me know in the comment section down below. Maybe leave a like on this video. If you haven't yet, please do subscribe because this is really interesting. So the like czar of diversity or manager of diversity and inclusion, these are new positions largely filled by far leftists who spent 100 grand on a college education that had no real job. Well, that is until they invented it, till they browbeat organizations into giving them gigantic salaries and called them horrible things until they did so. It's a grift. It's of course a grift just like critical race theory and a wide variety of other things. And this particular Google employee seems to have a spicy history. Google's, and I want to be very clear, this is Google's diversity, the head of diversity at Google, okay? Making some very spicy comparisons. Now, I know I have put my foot in my mouth at times, and we all make mistakes, but it to me, I don't know if I'd be making this comparison and making some of the correlations this person does. Camus Bob, according to his website, is the global lead for diversity, strategy, and research at Google. Among several listed areas of focus, Bob refers to an interest in, quote, the structural conditions that influence contemporary American life. I don't know why that's a paid position. I don't know who would pay for that, but it exists apparently. Unfortunately, part of this, quote, contemporary American life appears to include rampant and unapologetic anti-Semitism. As reported by the Daily Wire, Bob wrote a long blog post back in 2007 in which he stated Jews have an insatiable appetite for war and ending people, adding that Israel had an insatiable appetite for vengeance. Yikes. This even made it to the Daily Mail. This is nuts. I mean, this dude is the head of diversity and strategy research. Prior to this, he worked for the U.S. government at the National Science Foundation, where he was responsible for the $30 million annually of investments targeted on improving computing and STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. This is a good job, probably. Critics today rounded on Bob after a blog post was highlighted in an article by the Washington Free Beacon. Michael Dixon, director of Stand With Us, which educates people on how to fight this type of backwards beliefs, tweeted that all of this begs the question whether, one, Google did due diligence when selecting Camus Bob for his sensitive position of global DEI, diversity, equality, equity, and inclusion director, or two, whether he should remain in those positions. Now, this is an issue where, you know, they're essentially calling for his job for a blog post he wrote, I don't know, what, 15 years ago? I don't know if that's necessarily a reasonable, that's a reasonable thing to do. I think he should probably have a chance to explain exactly what was going on. But this is an issue. He also claims they have an insensitivity to the suffering of others. The comments were part of a longer mediation from Camus Bob, now head of diversity strategy at Google, that also slammed Israel for other issues. Interesting. Now, Google and Bob did not respond for comment. This post is likely to cast light on Google's diversity strategy in the wake of the demands for the group of employees that would that the company cancel its business contracts in Israel and publicly condemn them. While Google hasn't has been a vocal supporter of diversity initiatives, that company released a statement that is commitment to racial equity, not equality, in the wake of BLM protests last year, and it has not commented on the recent spike in crimes. Now, does Google hold, co-sign this guy's opinion from a blog post from 2007? That seems like a stretch. But as the Daily Wire points out, there is a lot of very, I would say, willingly hateful statements. He then proceeded to dilute as a, quote, hypothetical Jewish person the claim to their land. My faith would lead me to believe that this is the homeland of my people. My intellect would convince me that it cannot be that simple. He continued, before arguably justifying that the actions of, justifying the actions of people like Hamas. The faith and reason of the Palestinians or Muslims cannot simply be baseless. I would have to believe the degree of animus, vengeance, and other things they do now carry is not rooted in their identity, but rather in their experience, in the sordid nation shuffling and rebuilding that took place after the Second World War. It must be rooted in their hurt, in their sense of displacement, abandonment, and hopelessness. Now, maybe that statement in and of itself probably isn't that spicy. I mean, people probably have this sense, right? That's probably why they feel and act the way they do. But then going on to accuse them of being the people responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed, this is essentially the Daily Wire is saying, hey, this is anti-Semitic, clearly, by the definition, right? Now, it is, to be fair, a post from November 30th, 2007. Camu Bob was an outspoken and virulent anti-Semite. As of June 2nd, 2021, he is Google's head of diversity. Yet again, Jews don't count when it comes to diversity, it seems. Well, it's going to be interesting to see. How Google reacts to this. I'm sure they will respond, or how this individual employee will respond. I'm not going to call for anyone's job, but I am going to poke fun at, the diversity and inclusion people. There seems to be a trend. Of like SJW people who have terrible opinions about Jewish folks. This is not uncommon. We see this within BLM. We see this within like Farrakhan and his ilk. We see this among modern leftists. I'm not smart enough to know why that link is there, but what I do know is that's not very diverse and inclusive. And I do know that you can't judge an entire group of people based on the actions of one or even a small amount of them. But for whatever reason, they think that that's okay. Hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.